Hi guys, and welcome back to another fly tying tutorial. Now, a little bit different the format this week, and it's because I'm going to be using both cameras to try and explain how I tie some of my favourite blobs and fabs. I'm going to tie 3 flies today, and you might think, blobs, it's not that exciting. Everyone knows how to tie a blob, right? No, not really. So I've seen lots of blobs out there, certainly ones you buy in the shop, and they seem to be just not right to me. So I'm going to show you how I do it. It is very effective, and you can choose to take on board my advice or just think a blob's a blob, but it's up to you. So let's go over to the vise and we'll start with the first thing. So in the vise is a Hanak H250 barbless hook. This one's at size 10. Now it's finished on a heavy wire and it's finished in bronze. Now what I love about this hook is the gape. There's a nice healthy gape, and that's important when you're tying blobs. Now the other thing I'd like to mention at this point is that not all frits is created equally. In my opinion, and there is plenty of fritzes out there that you're more than welcome to check out, but the F&F fritz, the jelly fritz, is the best fritz that you can get for blobs, and the reason for that is it is really soft and supple, which means in the water you get a massive amount of movement. So what I'm going to tie first off is pretty much a cocktail blob. I use 2 colours for it. I'm going to be using the shocking pink in the back, and in the front end I'm going to be using the orange sunburst. Now you can cocktail blobs, there's lots of different variations of them, but I only have about 3. I'm only going to tie 1 today though, just to show you how I do it. Now one of the first things I do excuse me, is I have a little cup. There's no tea in it. This is simply a cup of water. What I like to do is take my fritz and just soak it in the water. I just find it makes it much easier to manipulate once I start tying. So I get the 2 lengths of fritz that I'm going to use, and depending on how many I'm intending to tie will depend on how much fritz I've cut off to use. I just like to get it nice and wet, like so that it's easier to tie with. So we'll put that to the side. So that's the preparation work done. First thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm going to get a little blob of super glue onto the shank of the hook. Now when I say a little blob, I mean just a little blob. It doesn't take much. I'm going to just spread that up the shank. Now the thread, I forgot to mention, this is nano silk from Semplify. It's at 12/0, which is quite thin, but I want that. So I'm going to take away my rat's tail. Now you'll notice that I've finished the fly just in line with the hook point on this 250. It might be different if you're using a barbless hook, but I've ended it just at the hook point. The next thing then, I'm going to tie in my back coloured fritz, which is going to be the shocking pink. And the first thing I want to do is just get myself a little bit of the core exposed to catch that in. Now blobs come in all shapes and sizes. The trend at the moment is actually much smaller blobs, but even though I'm using a size 10 hook, when the fly is finished, it will come across as a much smaller fly because I'm only using half the hook. So I'm going to just pull back the fibres as if I was tying a wet fly with a feather, and I'm going to get 4 turns of this fritz in on this size 10 hook. And on the 4th turn I'm able to come through with my nano silk, and I'm going to get 3 turns to pin that material down. The next thing then, I'm going to use my thumb and forefinger in my left hand to just ease that back. and I can get several turns in to secure it into place. Then I'm going to come in with a blade and just take away the pink fritz. Now I'll just sweep everything back out the way, and you can see because I've damped down the fritz and it's nice and wet, it just behaves so much better. Now the next thing then is we're going to get our sunburst orange, and again I'm going to just expose some of the core to catch in. I've exposed a little too much there, so I'll just trim that slightly, and then I can catch in the core of my sunburst fritz. I'll make sure that's secure, and I'm going to bring my thread to the front of the fly. Now with the orange we done 4 turns with the pink. Again, there are other colours available, and then I'm going to do 3 turns with the orange. Remember to try and keep that swept back out the way. When I bring it up, I can see where I'm going to finish. So you can see here the fritz, and I want to take away some of that material now. And I can do that with a pair of tweezers. Just going to come in, pull it out. Might seem a faff, but you will get a much nicer finish to your blobs. You don't want to overcrowd the eye. So this stage does help. What I'm doing is just taking away the fritz at that part that I'm going to catch in. As usual, it's a pain when you're doing it on camera, but when you get used to doing it, it does become much easier. So I can see my exposed core. I'm going to come in again, 1, 2, 3 to trap that into place. And then I'm going to sweep all them little fibres back. As you can see, I've left plenty of room at the front, especially with this 12-aught thread. And then I can start to build a small head. I'll just pull that fritz back out the way. Then the next thing, I'm going to come in with a little bit of varnish onto my thread, which will prevent me having to do it at the end when I might end up clogging the eye with varnish. So much better to get it done before you put your whip finish in. Then I can grab my whip finisher tool. 1, 2, 3. Pull that all together, and as you can see, we've now caught that in place. I've still got this large amount of fritz attached. I can come in with my blade. I can see the exposed core there that I'd created with my tweezers. And the last thing I like to do is I use like a wire brush. So you get them in the pound shops. It's just a wire brush, and I just like to comb all the fritz back over the eye of the hook, just to try and separate the fibres, and then I comb it forward like so. And you can see the thinner profile of this as it's being pulled through the water. But you can imagine once you stop pulling, that fritz just erupts, turns into quite a fluffy, blobby type fly. It really moves well in the water, and that's one of my go-to blobs. Okay, let's move along to the next fly. Again, we're going to be using the same hook. So it's the Hanak 250 barbless hook that I'm putting in the vise. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing preparation wise. I've already soaked a little bit of the fritz I'm going to be using, ready for use. Lost my thread there, apologies. So I'll get some wraps onto the shank through that super glue. So again, I'm going to bring my thread to the point of the hook, like so. Once again, I'm using 15mm jelly frits from F&F, and this is biscuit, as you can see from the label. Now, the biscuit fabs have done me very proud over the years. It's just a great fly. It's a great alternative. So when you're fishing a lot of competitions, the guys tend to fish very similar sort of flies. So if you're fishing something slightly different, like a biscuit, for example, when people are fishing the blobs, you can score extra fish with that. So next thing then, we're going to prepare our foam part. Now, what I've done is I've got a cylinder cut, and I've cut that cylinder in half. I'll show it on this camera so you can see. Now, before I dress that up to the hook, what I'm going to do is use a pair of scissors just to put a little slit in the foam, like so. Now, I don't usually do this at this point. I usually do it after I've tied the fly, put the snip in, but on this occasion, for the ease of instruction, I've decided to tie it in early. So the foam doesn't want to come past the bend of the hook. So I'm going to catch that in like so. The first turn's very gentle. I'm still using the 12-aught thread, and I'm going to catch that in like so. Once I've got it in, this turn is going to be a bit firmer. So when I come in with my thumb and forefinger, I can simply take that away. It's easily taken away. And then I can clamp down and tidy up my body. Again, you can see that I've finished just at the point of the hook. Now, again, what I'm going to do before I begin is expose some of the core here and catch that into place. Now, I wasn't sure about doing this video, if I'm perfectly honest with you, because it seems so simplistic. It's, you know, blobs are, there's no secret about blobs, but I see guys tying them, and it does make me shudder a bit that they're maybe not getting the best out of the fly. And some guys won't even fish blobs, and that's fair play. You know, it's your life, you fish how you like. I'm not here to tell you that fishing a dry fly 365 days of the year is wrong. If that's your bag, good stuff. But if you like to go out and catch lots of fish, you might want to get a few of these blobs and fabs into your fly boxes. Now, all I'm going to do this time is, as you can see, I'm stroking back the fibres every time, just to get as much of that material on the shank of the hook. Now, as I come round near the front again, I'm going to, I've seen the bit where I need to remove some of the frits. Again, I'll come in with my tweezers here. And just, you don't have to make it doesn't need to be super clean. But if you can get a chunk of that away, it will make your life a little easier when you come to finish the fly. It's a bit of a messy job, but someone's got to do it. So, as for fishing these kind of flies, there's a multitude of ways. You know, people just think blobs and stockies, but I've caught many a good fish on a blob. Overwintered fish, don't just think that they're for stocky bashing. They do a number on stockies for sure, but they're not just for stocky bashing. So again, I'm going to pull that fritz just over my vise there to keep it out of the way. I'll grab a little bit of varnish, like so. And then I can come in with my whip finish tool like so. And then again, I'm going to use my blade to remove the excess frits, and once again I can grab my brush and gently pull that through. So I'll just get the frits going the right way before I come on to my next point. Now, while I was away recently, I was up at the Airflow. I was very kindly invited along to the Airflow competition a few weeks back, and I had a conversation with Steve Smalley, and we were actually tying fabs in the accommodation in the evening. And one of the things he said is, well, why do you put a slit in your foam? Why not just leave it the same? And I was trying to explain very poorly, I might add, that putting the split in the foam makes it a wider surface area so that the fly sinks more slowly. And I think we confused each other. He said, well, it's exactly the same amount of foam whether you put the slit in or you don't. But if you put the slit in, you're increasing the surface area, which slows the fly down when it's drifting in the water. There is, I can't think of the name of the theorem behind it, but there's certainly merit in putting a little slit in the foam if you want the fly to sink more slowly. Now, as it was, when we were fishing that competition, we were finding that we were having to pull bits of the foam out because we wanted the fly to sink a little quicker. But that aside, that comes down to angling, and I hope that's helped. So there's the biscuit fab. That's another go-to fly for me, if you like. And we'll do one more. It's not required really. I think you get the gist, but if you're interested, I'll show you one more of my top blob patterns. Probably the most boring, but if you've gone to a fishery or you're fishing early season in the spring, you won't go far wrong with just fishing a plain orange blob. And I use the safety orange. Again, I'm going to just get some water on that. Now, while I'm tying this, it's a simple enough fly. You know, I don't think if you've watched the video to this stage, you get the idea. It's fairly straightforward stuff. So what I'm going to do while I'm tying this fly is just explain how, well, some of the different methods. There's so many, you couldn't really cover them all in a short video like this. But one of the most famous method, I would think, certainly to my mind, is there's a chap called Peter Appleby who I had the very great pleasure of fishing with in the G. Loomis team back in the good old days. And he showed me a method of fishing a single blob, which involved tying the blob on a very light leader. So depending on what your confidence levels are like in your tippet material, you would tie the blob on, say, 5 pound of tippet. And basically, the length of that tippet would be anywhere between 18 and 20 feet. And you wouldn't have any droppers, nothing at all. It would just be a single blob. And what he would do is he would retrieve it in short, sharp jabs through the water, and then he'd hang the flies at the end. And he would actually have tippet in his hand by the time he'd retrieved the fly. And it was so effective, it had to be seen to be believed, really. It's just one of the most effective ways of fishing a single blob. And it really does work. You should give it a go the next time you have the opportunity. Of course, the other way is using the blob as an attractor pattern on a team of flies. You would put the orange blob on the top dropper, and you would simply put drabber patterns like cormorants, hare's ears, crunchers in behind, and hopefully the idea is that the fish come to have a look at the blob as you're pulling it through the water, and when they turn away from the blob, to take the drabber pattern. So it's an attractor as well. The other way, of course, is you put the blob on the, sorry, excuse me, this is a bit fiddly, this, but you put the attractor on the point, which can often see fish rush up behind it, and then eventually they'll move past and take your drabber patterns. Now, as for fishing a fab, again, there's a number of different ways that you can do this. If you want to be super high in the water, you can fish a fab on the point as well as on the top dropper, and that will then keep your flies super high in the water. The thing to remember, of course, is that when you are fishing high in the water, the distance between your fly line and your first fab needs to be reduced. If you're used to, you'll know if you watch a few of my videos that I like to have 10 foot of tippet between my fly line and my first fly, and that's so I can change fly lines quickly during competition. But if you've practiced and you know that the fish are sitting high in the water column, you may want to reduce that length of tippet so that it keeps the flies super high in the water. If you want to cover more depths, you can simply replace the fab on the top dropper with another drab pattern like a cruncher or a cormorant, and you'll be able to fish a variety of water from between the surface and maybe 6 to 7 feet down. So there we go. Very simple, very effective, the orange blob. Now, if you've enjoyed watching this and you've taken anything from it, have a look at the videos that are on the screen now. These show me competing in some competitions. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.